I'm Professor Margaret Rogers Van Coops, and you're listening to my new show, The Truth. Actually, I've been doing about 12 or 14 shows. Not sure how many are up yet. I'm trying to do one every week, and I'm trying to take things that are topical, for example, in the news. I recently wrote some things about Donald Trump, the Enigma of Society, which is one of my books that I published where Spirit gave me, channeled, his ancestors, their names, their soul structure coding, their personality traits, their storylines of their lives. And I've just been reading it myself because I never remember what's in the books when I write them. And now that he's much more in the news with things that are happening around his life and his investments, I can really see the effect that his ancestors and their lives have had in influencing him in this life. So it really is a good book to read that was channeled by me to give you an idea about the soul structure coding, the DNA, the RNA. And for those of you who've been following me, I actually talk a lot about the RNA, DNA, and post-traumatic stress disorders, etc., etc. But this time around, Spirit Guides want me to take it to something much deeper, back in time, to the days of Lot, and to the days of tribal consciousness, and to the days of discourses in terms of anywhere in the world. So I've no idea what I'm going to say, but I'm pretty sure that they won't let me down and they'll teach me something that is quite good for me to know as well as for you to know as well. So here we go. All right, take a deep breath, Margaret, and just let go and surrender. Back in the times of Lot, there was in that city a lot of umbrage in terms of people coming and going from all different parts around the area where they would come to enjoy the night, which is kind of like Americans and Europeans going out on a Friday night and having a booze up and getting drunk and enjoying themselves. Well, life hasn't changed much, has it? Alcohol has always been something that the world has had present. Even if we go into Africa and the jungles, get the words out, thank you, Spirit, where they'll take cactus and leaves of that they're familiar with that we know nothing about and make their own wine. And of course, the world has shared with us all throughout all time that our taste for various things has caused us in many ways to like various foods relative to our country. And I did recently talk about obesity, and so I'm kind of going to, bring together in my mind, if Spirit leave me alone, a few of my shows to bring the concepts together here for you to think about what is going on in this world. So when we go back in time to 10,000 years ago, what we're actually looking at is the Middle East as a turning pot, if you like. It's like everybody was stirring their energies up, trying to be top dog. And when you think back in those days, different tribes in the Middle East were all in some way superior, and of course, everything was counted on the richness of the tribe. So if the tribe had plenty of animals and plenty of women that could be married off to other tribes, that way they would integrate the species in the Middle East and also would integrate their philosophies and theologies and so on. But unfortunately, with all the different kings and queens and other people that went here and there and far apart and disappeared and died and whatever, the world was left with controversy. And we're talking all those years ago of the Aryan Age, and I did a show on that, so I'm not going to go too much about it. But Aries is fire, and fire for life, fire for discovering things and owning them and keeping them was a very strong thing during the Egyptian period. And if you know anything about Egypt, it was a separated land and was often fought over for the fact that the Euphrates and Tigris rivers were there, and so there was much more uh, food that was growable in the moist soil. But of course, if you look at Egypt and around that area, it's also full of a lot of sand. So here I want to give you some insight that Spirit told me years ago. And I don't know, as I said at the moment, you can tell it's me talking, I'm not channeling or anything. What they told me years ago in the beginning of Egypt was that the philosophy and theology of the ancient ones was there because, yes, we did have alien things going on. And I don't want to talk too much about that at this time. What they want me to really talk about is the fact that the tribal energy, even in Egypt, between the people further north from Africa, Nubes, and the south, way down towards the other Bethlehem and so on, and further south and so on into Egypt and on down into Persia. So, if you were going to travel in those days, just imagine it walking for miles, pushing or pulling your cart. Hopefully, you've got one donkey, and if you've got lots of animals, you've got to move them around from place to place so they can graze. So, you could see in a country where the two rivers were joining became a very arable area for life to start and of course attack and own and control. So it's nothing new at this time in our modern time to see um, the Middle Eastern countries at war again, including Israel. And of course, when we go further up on the energies of uh, other things that happened out there in the Middle East, we can see that there has been trauma there for eons of time. So we see trauma with the Taurus age. Um, the Taurus age is very much about worship the bull and even see them as holy. Before that, the Aryan age was the Aries was the ram. And now we're coming forward into Pisces, which is the fish. And we've gone through those three areas. And now we are in Aquarius. And Aquarius is the water. So if we think back to the Great Flood of 5,000 years ago, as they say, which Spirit told me is not 5,000 years ago, it was even before that. And also, even before that, was another great flood that we don't know about, which covered the lands around the Middle East, which is why there is so much sand in Egypt, because what they showed me was the water rushing in, the earth tipping, slopping around like water in a bottle, and then finding a balance again so the water could run back for different areas and settle down. And in fact, I'm writing a novel right now, I'm channeling it from Spirit, and I've got the same thing going on in there. And this whole story is kind of a little bit about how we were ancient times and so on. So don't want to give the game away there, but what I do want to say about this is that all the way through history in the Middle East, we have had weather issues. And now we can see, as a result of weather issues, that that land is very arid. And of course, what it did was it gives birth, when water moves, to other areas. And so, coming forward 10,000 years, we've got less water in the Middle East and more water in the Western world. But look what's happening to us. We are arguing the same as the Middle East. So I've got to go back to the Middle East and talk here about this. Egyptians and Romans and Greeks all had a very strong effect on the general publics of the world, right? And where did they get that news from? Where did they get that education from? And of course, you've all probably seen Ancient Aliens and other programs like that, where they're talking about how did these people come here and build big stone walls that weigh tons in weight and didn't have the technology that we have today. And even with the technology we have today, we couldn't move any of those stones. It would take a whole number of trucks and ties and pulleys and goodness knows what else to move those stones. So, how did they do it? Well, Spirit told me that it was done by fluidicity. I'm now writing it in my novel actually, so they gave me the word finally. But I didn't know the word. All they told me was that the stones were moved by an instrument that was very small, like a plunger, and you could stick it on to one end of the stone and then one on the other side. Let's say it's an oblong, and two at the back as well. So it would only take 4 people to press the button to steer the I don't even have a name for it, but I'm going to call it plunger onto the stones as they wanted them, choosing which one they wanted at a time, and then turn on each one, and that would create a reverberation around the stone, which also affected the fluidicity of the stone itself. So the molecules in the stone became lightweight and air, or whatever you want to call it, that holds everything together was controlled by the resonation, reverberation, echoisms, if you like, of sound, so that light and sound together made it possible for 4 people to pick up a giant stone and move it. But then again, you're going to come back to me and say, well, how come there's these giant obelisk shapes that were cut and never quite moved? Well, the point is they were cut in the same way. They knew where the rock was and they could work on it and use sound to cut the sides and make it all a nice shape. And of course, that would have then been moved in the same way and placed wherever they wanted it to be. But because of the floods and all the things that were to happen, a lot of the things that were being made were washed away, drowned out, but not the big rocks because they're too heavy and they stayed. And so, what Spirit showed me was that this first flood to do with the prehistoric animals. It's really different when I'm talking. I'm not flowing, you can see that. These prehistoric animals were wiped off the planet, and we don't know exactly when. But what they told me is the aliens were also here and they had to evacuate as well. And so a lot of these settlements that they had made, which we are left with the debris of, was all washed away by the first flood, which was something like 25,000 years ago, not 5,000 years ago. So you can see it's a tremendously big difference. And when we judge by carbon how old a bone is from a prehistoric animal, we believe it's quite accurate. But what Spirit tell me is it's only accurate if you believe that the uh, carbon measuring is correct in the style of how you set it up to be. But with fluidicity, the stones were changed, molecularly changed with the vibrations of what they were doing. So actually, those stones were older than they believe they are. Apparently, I can't prove it. I'm just showing you what is supposed to be the actual truth. So if you look at a lot of the buildings that are still standing, you can see these very, very long square platform stones that they cut deliberately to make as a foundation base for anything else they were going to build on it. Now, obviously, if they were building cities, we have found quite a few of them, not me, but literally archaeologists who are out there. And I happen to have a grandfather who was an archaeologist, so as soon as I could toddle and walk, I was learning all about astrology, numerology, and all this kind of thing, and dowsing and energy sources from my grandpa. And of course, lots of interesting things. He was a very interesting man. Charles Aubrey Pogson the first. My father was Charles Aubrey Pogson the second, but no, he was only interested in the same way I am about how did they move the stones. And Grandpa would always say, you know what you need to know, no more, no less. And of course, in those days, for example, when Carter, who was his partner, found Tutankhamun's grave, they had already found a bewitched grave in England under one of the walls where there was two pots in there, tiny little fishbowl pots like this big. And when they took one each home, one to America and one to Britain, in terms of having it in the house at night, everything was negative. All sorts of bad things happened. And so, of course, they took them to the museums, one in New York and one at the British Museum, and they are there on show. And technically, I own them because I'm the only survivor. And I don't particularly want those little things in case they're still haunted. But what I did do when I was standing next to the showcase with the one that belonged to my father at the time, because Grandpa was dead, we were talking about it, and some guide came up who was protecting everything and says, "Oh, you don't want to stand next to that thing. It's evil." And I said, "Well, I know that. I'm here to clear it." And he looked at me like I was insane. He said, "Well, I'm not staying," and he went back to guarding his little post in another room nearby. And so I put my hand on the glass that was the case that this thing was in, and as I put my hand on it, I can feel, you can see this is my hand chakra. I'm not open right now. As you can see, if I open up, this will get really red. But I had my hands and they were open, and I'm about 16. And I zapped that little thing. And as I zapped it with light and beauty and all the things that I had to offer it, I was hearing screaming, yelling, people crying, and I was seeing a load of water. Okay, well, England never got flooded with water like that I know of. Nobody's told me about that. But the story itself is true, and I'm not making it up, that I felt that whoever this person was with the grave had the ability to tap into past times and had been considered a witch, and so had been buried with these two little glass things which were carried there. And it wasn't hers, they were put in the grave to tie her down as a witch, to never be awakened, to be forgotten under all these stones. And my grandpa Dowsing found her and called the man in. My mind's gone blank now. I know I've got spirit coming close. Anyway, he came over and they explored the whole thing together, and I've told you the story since then. Now, what I want you to understand here is that there are a lot of things that get encoded with, with negative energy throughout time. So here we are looking at the Middle East, and we've still got these tribes from back in the Lot time coming all the way forward to now, still arguing, still fighting, still trying to claim the land, which of course has still transformed and changed since another flood. So we're looking at two floods that Spirit have showed me. The second one is the one we talk about, Noah, and we also talk about everybody being dead. So how come all these people who were of the Lot time and of the 13 tribes in those times coming back to survival level 12 tribes? Well, I think God should tell everybody that those 12 tribes, not just the Jewish, but all 12 tribes, were the beginning of life again on this planet, because all the aliens had gone. They'd flown away because of the second flood, and some of them perished in the first flood. And so, there's not a lot for us to see today, but Spirit assure me that one day they will find alien bodies that are 24 feet tall. Now, that sounds strange, but when you think the atmosphere on Earth was very different during the dinosaur age, and that they populated this planet with the idea, these aliens, with the idea of living here indefinitely, not knowing that a big meteorite was going to come and plonk itself on our planet and practically destroy it. And yes, they did move it off its axis that time, but it rebalanced itself over time, and the aliens came back, but not the same ones, different ones, and did some more manipulating of genes and created more humans. And yes, today, even so, we are still being manipulated. So here's my truth. At 2 years old, I had a little grey alien that was in my house that used to come and play with me. And when I say house, apartment in England. And I remember that he was only 3 foot tall. Of course, I couldn't measure 3 foot at that age, but he was hardly than me. Sorry about that. That's my Google thing. Get rid of it. Uh, so, what happened was I basically took him for granted. He was nice and sweet. I didn't remember too much about him, but I do know that he was nice to me and was checking me out. I don't know what he was checking me out for at that time, but it was definitely. I can't get rid of my Facebook thing, I'm sorry. So it was definitely a good time. He would teach me, and I knew he was talking in my mind, not out loud. Otherwise, I'm sure my mother would have come to find out who I was talking to. But when I actually told my mother that I'd got this friend and described him, she admitted years later, in my 20s, that she had seen this little boy with yellow hair or a bright light around him. And of course, by then I discovered that him was not a boy, but a little grey. There are four sides of grey. Little ones, they investigate and work with us to stimulate our personality characters and learn from us in that way and understand more about humanity. They came later on the scene. The tall east of the four are sort of mean looking, got strong features in their faces. Their eyes are intense. They really stare at you. And they are the ones who have a cruel streak. And it's not because their face is strong in expression, it's because they are interested in the humanism of mankind, the animals, and all the things on this planet. And as far as I know at this time, from what Spirit's telling me, they've been doing a lot of research on finding out why we are so negative. So they will take people up to the ships and test them and basically look for those who are the strongest, most mature, sweeter, nicer, good genes kind of people that they can work with. What do they want to do? They're looking for leaders because this planet, as you know right now, is lacking leaders. So over time, they search, testing us. For me, you write about my book. I wrote about it in my book when they tested me with a room full of spiders and a room full of snakes, because those are two things I've been had the fear of God put up me literally as a young child. And I tell you, it was a horrible time. Also, they did give me a pregnancy and remove it. And I have seen that child frequently because they would take me to the ships and I would educate her the human part so that she and many others that have also been incubated on the ships are now on another planet on the other side of our sun, which we can't see. So that's all they tell me. And now I'm 81. I'm too old to worry about, but I do telepathically hear from them. And I do know that the child that I created with them was a girl, and she had a womb, but she didn't have ovaries. So I found out just recently. I was congratulated because she has 3 children, and guess what? They're my eggs. So indirectly, I have 3 more children. I was shocked. But at the same time, I was not shocked because I had 4 sons and I couldn't get a girl. So I'm not surprised because, yes, when they check our genes and they take the parts that they want from our sperm or our eggs, they're looking for procreation. So, of course, one man can fertilize many women. So, in the same way, they understand that. So, lots of women have given them small babies, which they've matured into adults. Then they take the women to teach the children earthly ways. So there's quite a lot going on that you guys don't know about. And I knew all about this when I was 10, or a bit younger actually, because no, I was about 7 and 8 when I was literally taken up to uh, a ship and told what was going on. And of course, when I tried to tell the adults, they thought I was insane. In a timeline where it would be about 1950. So people were just thinking I had a vivid imagination when I talked about aliens and things like that. And here we are today, everyone's talking about them and literally saying in our DNA strands, now that we've discovered them, that there are foreign parts that don't fit in with the way we expected them to be. So, yes, we have genetic engineering that's been going on. So, why have I now mentioned that when I'm relative to talking about these aliens who were here, who could move through fluidicity, these giant stones, and make these big buildings and things that we're still discovering? Another thing that spirit guides told me when I was about 15, and I think it was about that time that they discovered the Easter Islands and were saying these heads, and they didn't know why they were there. And Spirit immediately told me they're not just heads, they're full bodies. And I'm happy to say that here I am, 81, and this year I actually heard that they dug down on Easter Island and found the full bodies are there. Think how tall they are. They're enormous. Why would they make enormous statues? Because they were big, life size. Just like we do today, we make a statue of, say, um, some famous person and put it up there on a pedestal for all to see and praise and say, Hallelujah, this was a great person. So we haven't really changed, have we? We're still much the same as thousands and thousands of years ago. But where do we get that gene from that we want those pedestals with our favourite people on it? Well, it goes all the way back to, yes, you got it, ancient aliens. And so I'm not here to say go watch Ancient Aliens, but I have watched it on and off myself. And George Norrie and I used to work together years ago for Al, who was doing detective work. And yes, I did a lot of detective work with the British police and in this country on finding people who are missing and people asking me to tell them about statues in ancient times, and I would just channel and give them whatever came through. It was for them, they wanted it. I didn't bother about it, I moved on. But here today, now, Spirit guides are saying we have to believe that we do come from an engineering history, and we have to realize that we are on the brink of a transformation into the space age. And because we have to learn to understand this word fluidicity. So here I am to explain that when you are able to make an equipment that will generate a vibrational sound that is beyond our hearing, so that's difficult in itself for us to know about it, that it even exists, to be able to reverberate and resonate that sound, to move energy into a different format with the help of very strong um, magnets. I'm looking at the polarities of where they join together. This is pulling them apart. So the sound and the light and the reverberation, rather like playing a violin, only beyond our hearing, sends a friction backwards and forwards between these magnets, and in that way they can manipulate heavy weights and move things, and go steps further to move aircraft, spaceships as we call them, in and around the sky in different modality movements. And of course, we say, well, if we were inside one of those ships going at that speed, it would kill us. Well, the bottom line is a gyroscope is inside there, and I've been on the ships, I said, and I know they've been moving around, and I haven't felt a thing. So still. And so energy can be used to reshape things, expand things, contract things. I'm writing this in my novel, Regenesis, Book 2. So Spirit's finally allowed me to say, because the world is ready for this kind of information. When I was trying to tell adults at 10 years old, they all thought I was ridiculous, so I shut my mouth and kept quiet until I was 20. And when I started telling people in the churches when I was 20 that there were great beings who had been here, the religion came up and hit me in the face. How can you talk about that? We're all the children of God, and so on. So I shut my mouth again. And I went on to keep it shut until I was in my 40s and came to the States. It was then that America was beginning to talk about the pyramids, and of course I knew a lot about the pyramids and the Sphinx. My grandfather got a picture of him standing under the chin of the Sphinx on sand. And he was the one who told me there is much more under there. He doused it all. He pasted it all out. He marked it all out, but they had to move on because he was in the army, and they had to move on. So he couldn't do any more than leave his sticks in the sand, marking out the area. And years went by when I was literally famous in England and Grandpa was still alive, that he said to me, "It's amazing. Now it's time I told you," and told me the story of what he found for the Sphinx. And I can tell you that he said that the Sphinx and the all the surrounding buildings were once underwater for a number of years. Not for a long time, but for a number of years. What that meant, I don't know. And then there was another earthquake and another resistance thing, and things moved again, he said. And he had been noticing dowsing in India and Africa and different places of the world. So he was well known for finding water wells and knowing where earthquakes would start and things like that. And that was just one of many things he did. And so you can see I got the gene from my grandpa, remembering that I've talked a lot about DNA and RNA in the genes. So I was able to dowse whatever he would ask me to dowse and tell him exactly where it was on a map or in a field or under a tree when we're just talking about something, because I'd start to channel whatever the spirit guides were telling me to tell him. And that was working quite well till he got deaf, I'm afraid. So shouting didn't do too much, and writing notes didn't do too much either. So I was left to carry on exploring myself. I have the power to change energy. Here's an example. I was in Peru, and I was walking around chanting, spirit was in my head chanting, up by the big cross over Lima. And we left that night, and the next day there was an eruption, and all the people were in Lima were complaining about their circumstances, which led to change in that country. So I was just doing energy and chanting with spirit guides, and are caused to change in Peru. So imagine what aliens could do coming here with all their skills and powers, turning up on our front door and saying, "We're here to save you and make you change." What would they do? People would run a mile because they cannot understand the type of technology, the body language, the ways and means of integrating with these aliens who have actually made us, created us over ages and ages of eons ago. So if they did turn up, and many people say they want them to turn up, what would we do with them? Well, we'd have a hard time integrating with them. So what we have and what will continue is the aliens take one of us at a time, work with us independently, help us work with them to help them continue the research that they're doing. And I've been fortunate to be one of the people they picked because my psyche, my DNA, my RNA goes back a very, very long way. So, who are you? Do you know your history? Do you know your ancestors? If you do, I suggest that you spend some time thinking about who they were, what they did, how they thought, and then compare those days, those periods in history with who you are today. And realize that if you could pull your ancestors into your waking day here and talk to them, they would be astounded by you and who you are and the way you work and what you do. Because none of what we have today was available during the 1600s. And going back to Roman times, none of what we've got other than their buildings is correlated to what they did in the way they lived their life. And on back in time, I'm sure you've got the idea of us and the knowledge of what we know about people. So the truth is, and I've held it back for so long, the truth is we are aliens. We have always been DNA aliens. And we have always been able to connect with those who came to the earth originally and made us the way we are. And we are transforming. So, yes, they do turn up individually, one by one with us. And because we've reached the age of space, they are making a lot of contacts now with a lot of people. And my job is not to go out and talk about aliens. My job is to go out and talk about the dark and light side of our personalities, the dark and light side of God. Whoever God is God. You can't take that away from any species out there in the cosmos because we all know that somewhere in time, someone made the first species. And that species knew itself enough to make more species from its own energy. We have made a lamb in a petri dish by taking a cell from the lamb itself. And we today have learned by that can do surgery on an infant in the womb before it's fully grown and still like a tadpole. So we are so close to understanding the DNA, the RNA, the gene factor in how we can create a new type of man. And yes, they made a movie where the soldiers were made supermen. Fortunately, they went crazy and died because we don't want that kind of man. We want a man who's not made superman for a war, but a man and woman that's made super for bringing peace and truth to this world. So I've gone over time and I've given you a lot to think about, I hope, that you are an alien, that you are not just human, okay? And be aware that your children and grandchildren and great grandchildren and whoever comes after you are watching you right now to see what seeds you are sowing into this world for them to arrive later and fix. Well, we've spent years fixing the Romans, we spent years fixing the Greeks before that, and so on. Okay, it's time we all start to stop saying what was in the past and say here and now, right here and now, the buck stops from history. We create a new history. We are the peoples of the earth, and we are all of one race, the human race. That's what they want. That's what the aliens want. They want us to be one race. And as long as we keep fighting, as long as we keep having these troubles that we've got in Ukraine, so many countries, they're just in trouble. I don't even want to mention them. Until we stop fighting and sit down and, like the Native Americans, have a powwow and celebrate life and listen to one another, we are doomed to destroy ourselves and this world. And the aliens don't want that. Imagine you spent eons of ages teaching these people that were once your babies that you created to survive on this planet and reincarnate and come back again and so on. So where's the planet where we're spirits, where we're all living on a spiritual planet? Is it there? Do we know? We think of it as heaven, but I'm sure wherever it is, it's there for us all when the time comes, because I've been there and it's nice, but it's not physical, it's energy. And we're not anywhere near ready to be there because we can't even handle physical energy here. So I carried on a bit more, sorry, but do give me feedback. When this is up, do tell me what you think about the eons of time that we have been here on this planet and whether or not you believe that you have alien DNA in you as well as human DNA. And if we think about human DNA was originally alien DNA, you don't even have to work that one out. So somewhere in time we were created, and somewhere in time, generation after generation has evolved, and we are now leaving this world for the young ones to build a new world on this earth. Another last minute thing I want to say is no, we're not going back to Mars. Yes, we were on Mars. Yes, it is destroyed. No, it's a step back in time. That's not wanted. We have to move on into new dynamic of technology, of space, and other things to come. So, in terms of the Aquarian age, water, life, force, we have 3,265 or so years of dealing with this planet and water and evolving the unity of mankind to live in peace together as one nation, living on different parts of land, but all united in cooperation with one another. That's what they're waiting for before they're going to allow us to be independent and fly high out in space. So for all that we're doing right now, we are not ready. We are full of fear, we're full of anger, we're full of insecurity. We want everyone else to save us because we're still in a baby mind, and we have to grow up. We have to become adults who are brave, strong, powerful, independent, and yet at the same time mellow, soft, appreciative of life, and inventive in creating better things to come. So, okay, I'm ending now, and please do share this. And we say this now because people forget. Do share it and give me feedback, comments like that too, please. Thank you so much. Bye bye.